So, last time we were talking about if we were to do this, I guess manually, if we wanted to give ourselves cloud storage, the way we would handle this is go and get a web host, probably buy a domain name or something like that with GoDaddy, pay for monthly hosting, maybe it's $5 a month, something like that. That's going to give us access to this Apache web server, which also gives us access to a MySQL database. What we would do then is we would create multiple PHP scripts on there, creating our own little ad hoc API, where we could then, through GET protocol, what's the difference between GET and PUT?
Post.
GET and POST, rather?
Get shows the whole URL.
GET passes the information in the URL. POST passes the information as part of the HTTP frame, not in the URL, so you can't see it. So if we're building plain text URLs, we would use a GET. In any case, we talked about some of the different, we talked about APIs in general, where public APIs are typically given to us in either XML or JSON. So it's a standard format, but we're creating ours as an ad hoc type thing for representing our data, separating it by Dane strings, right? So at the end of the day, if we were doing this ourselves, we would have to set up a web host, write some PHP scripts, create a database, get the IP address and all that crap of the database, go into our couple of PHP scripts and actually program them to read and write stuff from the database. So, now all of that would cost us, well, there's free ways of doing it, but let's just say $5 a month. We're not talking about prohibitively expensive. And for that $5 a month, you can have unlimited databases and unlimited scripts. Okay? Now, to make this easier for us, since we don't, and I'm assuming this is easier because I actually haven't used this before, but it looks pretty slick. There is a website called parse.com. And what parse.com lets us do is it allows us to create an app. So we can create a new app. I've already done this for Puppet PM. And there is a pricing model where up to a certain, I think I looked at this last time with you guys, right? So up to a certain point, which is going to be more than enough for us, it's free. Won't cost us a dime. All right? So what we're going to do, let's see. I'm going to go down here to, so I've already set up this app. This just goes to the create new app little wizard dealy thing here, okay? And I believe that pricing thing is on a per app basis. So I think you get 1 million pushes per app and that kind of stuff. So anyways, I already set it up. I'm going to come down here to Quick Start. And I'm going to choose iOS, because that's what we're using. I'm going to choose an existing project, Puppet PM. I believe I've already downloaded their SDK. Let me just double check that here real quick. Yeah, I did. So I've clicked that link already. Okay. And we're gonna see how we need to put this link in. Well, we can go ahead and do it right now. So they say so download the SDK. I just did that. I already opened up Xcode, I believe. Yep. So now they say unzip the file you downloaded and drag the parse.framework folder into the Xcode project folder. So I'm going to go ahead and move over to Xcode. Here's my frameworks folder in here. So frameworks are libraries. So the frameworks that are already included that we would have seen at the top of like one of our .m file or .h files rather is UIKit.h, all that stuff. So that stuff inside of Foundation. We have core graphics, we have UIKit, core data. So these are frameworks that are already included in our project. We're going to give ourselves another framework, the framework for this parse. So I'm going to go into my downloads. I'm just going to click on that parse zip file and it'll go ahead and unzip it for me. And here's the parse.framework file it creates. So I'm going to just drag that into this frameworks folder. And make sure I select copy items in the destination folder and hit finish. Okay? And make sure you hit the box for copy items. Otherwise, it was defaulted for mine, but make sure it's on there because if you don't, then it's going to be linked to wherever my downloads folder is on my computer. And if I take my project someplace else to a person who is either who doesn't have that file in their downloads folder, my project won't work on that machine. I'll have to re-download the framework. Okay, so I did that. Oh, there you go. Make sure copy items to destination groups folder is checked. See, savant mode. Okay, so now it should look like this. We saw parse framework show up. Now we need to click on targets, our app name, and build phases. And so let's go do that. And then link binary with libraries is shown. Was it not already in there? Okay. So I don't know where they told us to go, but I'm going to click on this. Then build settings. Actually, is that where they told us to go? Hold on a second. One moment. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm on targets. So they were using a little bit older version. So I click on my file here. Then up here, and actually there's probably a window that can pop out. There we go. So there's targets versus project. Then click on, I think they said build phases. Okay, then link binary with libraries. Okay. Oh, and it already put it in there, it looks like. So oh, they want us to add a bunch of other libraries. Things that must work with the parse library. So we need to add all this crap. Okay. So audio toolbox.framework. So we'll hit this. There's audio toolbox. Add that. CF network. Add that. Core graphics, I think we already have that. Core graphics framework's in there. Core location framework. Libz. 1.1.3. Mobile core services. So what we're doing here is we're adding a whole bunch of libraries that the parse framework relies on to make all their magic happen. Because parse is a one-stop shop for push notifications, for storage, for location services, for a bunch of stuff. Quartz core. That's a fun word to say. Quartz core. Security. Store kit. That might actually already be in here. No, it's not. And system configuration. Okay, so there's all that. Then, and this is part I like. This is kind of a cool site, from a quick start guide, because remember, we selected which project we were using, right? So what they do is they tell us to open up the couple of different files in our code. So go into our appdelegate.m, and we need to import the parse statement. So we can just copy and paste the stuff, but what I really like is this one, where it gives us our specific private keys for this specific app. Just copy paste this code. It'll just work. So this is going to be kind of neat. appdelegate.m. So go into appdelegate.m, scroll the way up, and we'll go ahead and import parse.h. And remember, this will not work unless you have put that framework in there. Okay? Then, in our application did finish launching method, the one we've been used to working with, we need to throw this code. So here we'll put it right before we start doing our, oh, that looks ugly, doesn't it? How do I fix my text in this? There we go. Oh, that's... Guess we're not fixing the text in that. Let's do this. Let's do this. There we go. Oh, it's just because the text is too long. It's just doing the best it can to fit it all on the screen. So what we're doing is here. Here, this would be an interesting quiz. Set application ID. Well, this whole thing. What is this? If you had to describe what this guy is, don't try to tell me what you think it does. Just tell me what kind of animal this is. Set application ID, client ID. Here, I'll even give you a hint. Oh, go ahead.
So you need to make your fish like that as user default.
And I told you, don't tell me what you think it does. This is a method. What kind of a method is it?
Class.
How do you know it's a class method?
You're calling it with the class name.
Calling it with parse. I didn't actually create an instance of parse to call it. So now we're seeing somebody else's documentation, somebody else's code, and we're using it in here. And we actually didn't have to look at the documentation. They just said paste this. But methods inside of so think about this like our init with name and address, something like that. So this is parse set application ID and set client ID. So this is a method that takes two parameters. Both of them are NS strings. The name of the method is a little bit weird for Objective-C because it's got really two names. It's a descriptive method name, but then we're calling it with the name of the class, parse. Make sense? Okay. So we did that. So now we could also track basic statistics around the application, around applications opening only for this. So we'll go ahead and drop this in there. So this is for analytics stuff. If you notice on parse, one of the things that it tracks is also analytics about how people are using your app, that kind of stuff. Okay, so we'll compile and run it. Just compile it real quick, make sure everything's still legit. It's still legit. We'll go ahead and run the app. Okay, so we ran our app. Now, step 4, test the SDK. So what are we going to do? It wants us to, we already did that. So we're going to create a new object and then save. So we're going to go ahead and put this code in there. So this is kind of like our NS user default stuff. this text bigger than usual?
Looks like it's just a wee bit. That looks normal.
Does it?
Yeah.
Oh, we're on presentation. We don't need it that big, do we? Let's go.
There that one. Pure gold. Can you change the font size at the bottom?
Yeah, potentially.
What about presentation mode? What they do is like make it
I bet you we need to select all the text here. And then we can change it. Let's go 14. Clearly that didn't work.
Genius.
Let's go. You're having me create fonts. Here, I think we need to do this. Duplicate basic. Let's call that class, and I'm pretty sure we can change this one. There we go. Oh, hold on. We have to select. We have to select all this. That good? Too small?
Well, the blue is smaller than
Yeah.
You don't think that's legit? is that what you're saying, Dane?
Yeah, kind of.
The blue is kind of a different size than the other stuff. I don't know if you've seen that, but
I've never seen that.
I'm picking up on that.
is that good?
Yahtzee.
We can read it. It's big enough. Okay. Okay. So the thing we just added is we created something called a PF object, which I'm sure stands for parse something object. So this is kind of like our NS user defaults. Okay, and but when we created it, we were creating this specialty object, PF object, and we're creating it with object for class with class name, and we're just naming the class. So we're just calling it whatever we want. This is going to be our way of seeing it in code, or seeing it on the parse website here in a second. They're going to have us come down here and hit test, and I think we'll see something in here from the class test object. And then what are they having us do? They're having us set an object. We're going to put an NS string in there called bar, and the name of the variable is going to be foo. And then we're going to do test object save, so it should save it to the save it to the cloud. So go ahead and hit play on this, so that'll actually run this through the app delegate again. We'll create that object and it'll save it. Okay, done. Now we'll come into the website and we'll hit test, and hopefully we see something in our cloud. So here is Foo Bar. We could share that on Facebook.
Do it. I wanna see this.
Okay, thanks. Okay, but now notice, first of all, can anybody identify this for me? What language is that in? It's JSON.
Oh,
See, so at least you know I'm not lying to you about all the crap we talked about last time. I said most modern things use JSON.
I don't know, I was just walking out of that class thinking that was all.
Oh, seriously. Now notice it's given us some extra information here though. So the only information we saved was this value, this is the name of the variable, and this is the and that's its value. But notice it has something called an ID with we're going to assume that's a unique identifier. It's going to tell us when it was created, when it was last updated, so on and so forth. Okay? So now the next thing is learning the SDK. But before we do that, I want to test something. So we're going to create a role object. So role objects take in a name and a description, right? So we're going to do this from within app delegate. So I need to come up top here and I'm going to import role.h. Oh, interesting little C programming factoid that you see up here. Notice that when we imported role.h and appdelegate.h, we surrounded by double quotes. Yet when we import the parse.h, it's angle brackets. This says what we're importing is not local. It's in some framework. It's in some external library. This says this is in my local bundle. This is one of my files over here. So when we have double quotes around it, we're saying look for this guy locally. Otherwise, it's going to look in your linked libraries. Make sense? And that's something from a long, long time ago with C programming that has just come through the ages. All right. Now, out of curiosity, test object. Let's see what else this guy can do real quick. Hello. I didn't want you to do that. There we go. Is there an update? Let's try this real quick. I'm going to create a second version of that variable, but for the same key of the same class. So we're going to still have another test object class with the variable name foo, but I'm going to change the value to bar2. I want to know if this turns into two separate objects on there or whether it updates the original object. Okay, well it definitely didn't update the original object. Let me come back here to dashboard. Here's our Puppet PM. Let me go to data browser. This is probably going to show me all the objects that are up there. Okay, we do have two objects up there with two unique identifiers. So the question is how do we get something? So let's go back to quick start. We will actually, let's go to tutorials. It'll probably show us how to get so this is where we just were. Let's see, dive into our docs. So let's look at what we can do here. So let's look at objects. This is actually an interesting syntax for working with it. What I want to know right now is how do we retrieve something? There we go. This is what I want to know, how to retrieve something. All right, so retrieving objects. Saving data to the cloud is fun, but it's even more fun to get data out. Woohoo! So, let me just copy this code. I'm going to comment this out for right now, because we currently have two things saved in the cloud, and now I want to get something out of the cloud. All right, so we're creating something called a PF query. And what are we querying? We're querying from class name test object, not game score. So this actually already, I can tell, works pretty similarly to how data stores work for Google App Engine. So we store things as objects that we give names to. So we're storing something in a test object. So I'm going to query from class test object. Well, I have to get something with a freaking ID. I can't. I'd like to say something a little more. Let's see what I can do with query. I can get first object. Let's just do that for right now. We'll get the first object that it finds. Okay, and that guy returns a PF object. Okay, now this will be actually interesting. So I'm gonna print out foo, which is actually a PF object, and we're gonna see what that guy looks like in string format. Because he actually is a PF object. We're going to want to try to extract some stuff from that here in a second. But I'm just interested in what it looks like in string format. Okay, it crashes hard. is what it. Let's go back in here just to make sure it wasn't. Okay. Yeah, it just wanted me to force it into being a string. Otherwise, it treated it as an object. Okay, so this is what it printed out. So it printed out foo is equal to bar inside of. So it basically printed out just the value portion of our code. Now, what I'm interested in is, can we get here, value for key. And the value for key was foo that we want, right? And that should be a string. So now it should just say bar as our output. So there's bar for our output. Okay, so decent enough test there. So now what I want to do is I want to see, can it store more complex objects? So I'm going to save something else. So we'll comment this out for right now. And I'm going to create a role. Role pointer, R is equal to role Alec init with name Simon and description Tubby.
I have my own language.
That's right. Well, this one's a fat joke. Okay, so we create a brand new object of type role. Now, I'm going to rename this guy role object instead of test object because I only know, at this point, I only know how to retrieve the first one. So I'm assuming there's some sort of like SQL-like query we can do in a second, but I just want to clear this up first. So we're going to create a brand new test object, whatever, of type role object. Then I'm going to set object R for key a role. And then tell it to save itself. So we want to know if we can save complex pieces of information. That is, can we save an NS object generically, or do we need to go in and do we need to say, okay, I'm saving these pieces of information? Are we back to where we were before, where we had our local representation for our roles, string representation for our roles, or can we actually store whole role objects? Do you have a guess? Let's save it first and see if it successfully. It didn't really like doing that. Yep. PF object values may not have class role. So we're back to where we were before. So we have to store them as it appears to be strings or probably primitive types, things built into the language. So what we can do is we can set object Simon for key name. Set coleslaw for description. So we no longer need our role object. And then we'll save it. So now instead of saving one piece of information with this object, we're saving two pieces of information. Make sense? Okay. So we don't have to do the parsing at the very least, it seems like. So we'll go ahead and save this. So now we should have a brand new object in our cloud of type role object. And this guy should have a single entry with two pieces of information in it. So we should be able to go back to our cloud now. Go to dashboard. Go to data browser. And here's our role object. So we have a role object with two pieces of information, a description and a name. So this tells us what role objects are like. So this particular role object here, this is the crazy ID. Description's coleslaw, name is Simon, created at this time, updated at that time. Similarly, here is our test objects. So notice we have two separate objects where each object has a single attribute called foo. One of these objects, foo attributes, has the value bar. The other one has the value bar too. So this is an upgrade to what we were doing before because we don't have to parse. And what I mean by that is I can come back in here and we're going to get something of type role object. And we're going to print out name is that, description is that, and then we're going to say a role value for key name, and then a role value for key description. So this essentially has done the parsing for us. All right, so we'll prove we can read it by creating a new query around role objects, then saying, give me the very first one you find, because that's all we know how to do at this point. Then we will print out the name and description associated with that role by getting its name attribute, or its name, the value for name, and its value for description. And we should get Simon and coleslaw printed out here. Name is Simon. Did I not? What did I call it up here? Did I misspell it down below? That seems to not be right. They got the name right. Name is Simon, so it just got that as a string. But description, well, this is all part of the JSON. We would have expected all this here, everything I just highlighted, to just say coleslaw. Because that's what getting the, just out of curiosity, let me steal this word. And let's get the description twice and see if the for name it just shows coleslaw. No, it did it. It did it twice. So it doesn't know how to get the description out of there. Coleslaw. Why is that? Let's not call it description. Let's call it DESC. And just so they're not confused, we'll call them Simon 2, coleslaw 2, so we know we're getting the right thing. I wonder if description is a reserved field already in the table, the object. Like all of them have descriptions. So we might have to just not use the word description as a variable name. All right, so we wrote that. We should be able to come into our data viewer now. And we see we have I wrote description. Here, let's just do this. We don't have role objects right now. So I got rid of those. Let's run this guy again and resave that dude. Now we have a role object. What? We do role object 2. It seems to be convinced that it has a description built in there. It should have a new class. There we go. You have to go back and reload it for new classes. Okay, this guy has a description and a name. It's actually interesting. Can I delete an existing class? All right, well, in any case, I created my role object 2. So now we want to read that guy in and get our description, and so we won't save. So we're going to get a role object 2, and we're going to read in the name and the description. Like that. DESC, I think that's what I called it. DESC, yep. Okay, and we hope we get Simon and coleslaw. Well, Simon 2 and coleslaw 2 displayed. And we did. So my guess is there must be a built-in field named description. So don't name your variables description.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. So let's just look at a couple of other things here in our last few minutes. I'm going to go to, well, I can go to documentation, I guess. Okay, I'm interested in PF query. Okay, so adding basic constraints. So where a key matches a certain okay. So the way it would work is this. Let me save one additional one. So name is Mike, Dane is my description. That's not creepy. Okay, so we're going to save a second role object too, just so we can prove how the query thing works here. So this will get saved into the cloud, and we'll, trust me, it's up there. All right, we just saved another object. That way I don't have to leave the documentation page. Now I'll go ahead and see which one comes back as the first object. I believe it should be the Simon assignment 2, coleslaw 2, 1. Okay, yep, assignment 2, coleslaw 2. But let's say we want to get the one where the name is Mike. So what I'll do is after I create my query here, I'm going to say query. Let me look at the documentation here real quick. Where key. Where key name. Oh, that's actually not the one I wanted. I grabbed the wrong method. Not just PF regular expression. So we're going to say where the name matches. I'm going to say Mike like this, but you can actually get more complex than that because of it's a regular expression. So it'll match full strings like that, but I can also say match MI star. So anything that starts with an MI. But I'll go ahead and try to retrieve just the object whose name is Mike, just to show us how this whole thing is working. All right, so I'm going to initialize my query, then add some constraints to my query, then I actually execute my query. So I'll get the first object returned by this executed query, which should be the one that has Mike and Dane. So there's Mike and Dane. Make sense? Let's see. Getting all matches for a query. So what we're using is the way to get the first match for a query. We can get the number of things that are returned. So we can get count objects. So count objects would be NSLog num objects %d query count objects. This should give us 1 for that. So there's our 1. But if we said choose one whose first name is Simon 2, or whose name is Simon 2, we actually have 2 of those objects. So now count objects should give us 2. Here's the 2. Make sense? All right. So now we have something that mostly functions for doing some simple cloud storage stuff. We'll come back next time and we'll actually implement our, because I think now we know we have enough to be dangerous, so we can actually save our stuff in the cloud. And then I'll have you guys do that as a homework assignment after you've seen me do it. Sound good? All right. See everybody on Friday.